All right, so buenos dias, buenas tardes a todos. Welcome back to our first event this February. Yo soy Daryll, yo soy de Filipinas pero vivo ahora en Madrid. So you might already know. So in today's event, we are blessed to have one of our teachers from the Philippines as well. She is a friend of mine and she's currently teaching at Instituto Cervantes. She holds a master's degree in Asian studies. But at the same time, she's really passionate about learning Spanish and other languages as well. And she's also a certified DELE examiner, which means that later on, you could ask her questions about the exams. So we have different levels from A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So Nadine also holds a certificate in DELE, which is C2, Cdos, the proficient level. And so later on, if you have any questions about that, you can definitely ask her anything. But without further ado, our guest for today, please welcome Miss Nadine O'Malley. Hola Nadine.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Muy
Vale,
bien,
entonces,
gracias.
vale, bienvenidos a todos. Okay, so welcome to everyone. I'm glad that you could make it today, or I don't know where most of you are located. So I'm here in the Philippines, while Daryl is in Madrid.
Some of them are in
Part
Madrid as well, and some parts of
okay, so
Spain.
yeah, so there's quite a bit of time difference, but I'm glad that there were people who could make it to this event. Okay, so I'm not gonna dwell much on the introduction. I'm just gonna go straight ahead to the presentation. Okay, so I'm just gonna share my screen with you guys, and I've actually prepared a PowerPoint for this, so the presentation is gonna be much more focused. And if you have any questions, okay, then you can ask me later, no? Me podéis preguntar, o me podéis hacer preguntas luego después de la presentación. Okay, so I just took the title of the event, which is Road to Spanish Proficiency in Spanish Language Learning Journey. So yeah, for me, learning a new language is kind of like a journey. So you take some steps, and the destination can be different depending on the person. Okay, and it's mostly up to you to figure out what you want to get out of learning another language. So today we're going to focus on Spanish. Okay, so why Spanish? Is it worth it to learn Spanish? Of course, I'm pretty sure most of you will say yes. Okay, so just a glimpse on how I began my Spanish learning journey. So I started learning Spanish around 2008, so it's been more than 10 years, no más de 10 años. Due to other things going on at the time, I wasn't able to consistently sign up for courses. At this point, I was already working, no, and I had just graduated from college. Even back then, I was already interested in learning Spanish, but I just didn't have the time and the money to do it. Okay. Spanish seemed to be the most logical choice, given that one, we have a lot of Spanish vocabulary in our language already, or I mean in Tagalog, because it's my native language. And number two, it seemed to be the most accessible and the most practical. Yeah. Just a fun anecdote. When I was a young kid, my mom used to buy me a lot of books, and she bought me three dictionaries, and they were all very complex languages. None of them was Spanish. So I had Japanese, Arabic, and Chinese. But they were like bilingual dictionaries. But I think in a way, yeah, that sparked an interest. Okay, so once things cleared up, I began to continue my learning and was able to progress both inside and outside the classroom. So I think this is important, especially if you're one of the learners who are doing formal classes, and you might think that your progress is heavily dependent on the classroom learning. So actually, even outside the classroom, you can advance with your language learning. So here are some reasons why learning Spanish can be advantageous. Number one, I think as of now it's the fourth language in the world with most speakers. I think it used to be second, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure now. I think anyway, there's English, Mandarin right now, and I
Mandarin.
think Hindi, then
Mm-hmm.
Spanish comes in fourth. Um, there's a growth of job opportunities for bilinguals or multilinguals, including here in the Philippines. And of course, it's also great for your personal growth. Okay, so let's get to the next slide. I'm sorry, that's supposed to be the problem. Let's
Okay.
change that. Sorry. Okay. So let's get back to the presentation. Okay. This tips. So you might be asking, okay, so what are some of the things that I can do to learn, to advance in my language learning? Okay, so number one, this is very important. Find materials that interest you. Okay. So this can be anything from songs, podcasts, books, or series. And this is very important because if you're bored with the material, you're not gonna get far. Okay, you're not gonna get very far. You're just gonna associate it as, or you're just gonna think of it as something tedious, and that's gonna stop you in your journey. Okay. And then number two, connect with others who share the same goal. So language learning can be much better if you interact with other people. Now, in essence, make it a communicative process. And I think this is true for a lot of other activities. Like it's fun. It's much more fun if you can find a community, a group of people that have the same interest. And since language is all about being able to communicate, it's also great if you can practice with other people instead of just learning it by yourself. Okay. Number three, find language models. Okay, language learning is, for the most part, a process of imitation. So when I think about this, I remember the time when I was learning English, when I was acquiring it. And as most of you, I'm not sure about your experiences, but I think a lot may be able to relate when we say that we don't necessarily had to learn all of the grammar rules, right? We just got exposed to like English media, songs, right? And I remember like the series Friends. So I liked Phoebe's character, and there was a time that I imitated how she spoke, for example, how she communicated, like gestures, and so that helped me to like ingrain the language even more. So it's all about imitating, like how do the speakers, the native speakers of this language, use it when they actually communicate. So you have to be able to find a language model that could help a lot. And then number four, make it a habit. So this is important. It's important to incorporate it into your everyday life. So when you're learning a new language, it can be easy to think of it as something separate. Like, okay, on Mondays and Wednesdays, I have a language class. But outside of that, you don't really use it or you don't get exposed to it. So you have to create a connection with the language. When in a country that speaks your target language, don't fall into the trap of the language bubble. So, what do I mean by this? I don't know, but have you ever noticed that there are lots of foreigners that come to the Philippines and they don't necessarily ever learn how to speak any of the local languages? So, yeah, that's a lot of that is down to the language bubble. Like most of them can get by with speaking English, so they're not forced to actually learn the native languages or the local languages. And that can also happen, like, let's say, if you're in a Spanish speaking country um, where foreigners are catered to in English, or where you find other people from your country. So, yeah, it's easy to become complacent and just say, okay, you'll just limit yourself to communicating in the languages you already know while limiting your use of your target language to situations where it's just very necessary. Okay, so you have to go out of your comfort zone. And then last one, enjoy. Just enjoy the process. Language learning can be stressful for some, but this is quite unfortunate because stress can slow down the learning process and create aversion. So it's important to find positive experiences to connect to learning. and to acquire language at your own pace. So don't be too pressured. There's a very useful illustration that I came across, and it's one in which involves building a house. Like if you build a house made of bricks, right? So think of language learning as building your house brick by brick. So when you put on a layer of cement, you don't necessarily stack them up quickly. You have to give time for the foundation to settle. Then you just keep stacking, but you have to give it time. Okay, so that's also the same when you learn a new language. Give yourself time to acquire the new knowledge. Okay, don't be too pressured to go too fast or to master it all at once. Okay, so my experience. What were some of the materials or activities that helped me? Because I don't know if these will help you, but hopefully you will get some recommendations from them. Okay, listening to podcasts. I am a huge fan of horror or comedy. So I remember that when I was learning, when my language learning was at its peak, as far as formal classes were concerned, I was working night shift. So when you're working night shift, at some point you will get sleepy, tired, and bored. So my go-to in order to wake myself up was to listen to horror, something scary, or comedy. Anything funny. So those were the things that perked me up. And I thought, okay, so why not listen to them in Spanish, right? Okay, so for comedy, you're gonna have to find. You can find a lot of materials like I forgot. I'll find a video, but it's like a stand-up comedy. Okay, for horror, relatos de terror, you can look that up in YouTube. Okay, so I think there's one by Teo Rodriguez, and then there's one that's a collection of horror stories, mostly from Mexico. But that's only if you're interested in those kinds of things. Okay, and then Radio Nacional España. Um, I had some programs that I listened to, like Gente Despierta. So Gente Despierta, it's kind of a wordplay because this used to air late night in Spain, I think, or early morning at dawn. So it means people who are awake, but I think it also means like people who are intelligent, despierta. Okay. This one should be No es un día cualquiera. Okay. La noche en vela. So yeah. Um, I like these programs because they're very informative. They don't just play music. They actually have topics that they discuss with other guests, segments. So that was very helpful. And then Notes in Spanish. This one helped me when I was in the intermediate stage. This is a podcast that was created by two people, Ben and Marina. Okay. So the story is that Ben, and this is an actual story, Ben is from the UK and Marina is from Spain. So Ben goes to Spain and he is trying to learn Spanish and he looks for someone to do an intercambio with and he finds Marina. So later on they come up with the idea to make it like a like a business venture. So yeah. um and actually now they are married with a kid. So that ended pretty well. Notes in Spanish is actually not just a podcast. They provide materials, so there's a transcript of the dialogue, and then they also give you a list of vocabulary at the end and some exercises. So the audio is free. Okay, so the audio is free, and you just have to buy the transcripts, but it depends on you whether you want to buy them or not. I'm not endorsing. Okay, so I'm not an endorser for Notes in Spanish, but yeah, you can just go to their website and look at the audio. It's all free. And then Radio Ambulante. Okay, so if you want something that's more focused on stories centering around Latin America, this is one of the best places to go to. So they have lots of episodes already, and actually even now, they're still producing lots of episodes. So you can go there, and they cover a lot of topics from social to political to economic. Okay. Okay, talking with native speakers. All right. So, um, one of the resources that helped me with this was italki. Again, I'm not an endorser for any of these materials. Okay, I'm just sharing what helped me. So, what is italki? I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of it. So, italki is a platform where um, you can find professors in your target language. And the good thing about this is that it's at your own pace. You can schedule lessons when you feel like you need them or when it's convenient for you. And the prices are very affordable. So that is what drew me to Italki. And that helped a lot. Actually, there are two kinds of teachers, I think. Those who are offering like lessons that are standard lessons. And then there are those who are there if you just need to practice speaking, like casual conversation. So you have options. Okay, and then what else? Okay, the Club de Lectura in Instituto Cervantes, Manila. So this is something that is quite close to my heart because actually now the Club de Lectura um, no longer exists. Okay. It was actually an initiative by the head librarian at the time, which is Carlos Balmaceda. Actually, he's back now, but as you know, we Instituto Cervantes changed headquarters, so the library is much smaller now. It's not as easy to hold meetings there. But what we did before was we were given stories, and we would be assigned segments. So we would read them, and the next meeting we would talk about, we would explain the segment or the part that we read, and we would be giving our interpretation, and others could comment, and vice versa. It was a good way, it was a good practice for us to just contribute our ideas, and it was open for mostly anyone. People didn't have to be advanced learners or they didn't have to be fluent. They just had to be interested in literature and meeting other people who are learning or who were also learning Spanish. Okay, next one, watching series. Okay, so if you have Netflix, all right, maximize it. One of the latest that I watched was Hit. So I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Maybe. I hear it's pretty popular in Spain right now, I think. So it's about the educational system and this one guy who's trying to make a change, right? So I like it. I actually the like the plot. I like the message, and again, it helps me to observe how native speakers communicate amongst themselves. There's another one, Aquino I Can Viva. I think this is a very old series, but it's comedy. It's about people in the same building, living in the same building, neighbors who are nosy, so all the funny things that can happen when you try to get along with your neighbors. And then Plaza España. So I think this had something more to do with the Civil War period. Okay. So yeah, this is also comedy. You can look this up in RTV. So Hit, I think, is in Netflix, or I think it's also in RTV. Aquino I Can Viva, I used to be able to watch episodes on YouTube. Unfortunately, I think now they're taking it down, but I think they're making it available on another platform, but it's paid. So yeah. Okay, songs. Yeah, I also like songs as a means of learning language. Um, some of my favorite artists are people like Ricardo Arjona, for example, okay, Claudia Prieto, okay, even songs by Shakira. You'll find some of her songs that are pretty good, some which are more like ballads. Okay? So yeah, it's really up to your taste. What kind of songs will draw you, but they can be helpful because with the melody and the rhythm, okay, and if you feel very much drawn to the theme of the song, for example, then it can stick in your mind. Okay, you can also try switching your social media, your phone, etc. to Spanish. Okay, but be careful though. Always make sure you know how to switch the language back to your native one, because when I was starting out and I did this with one of my phones, and this was way, way back. hace mucho tiempo. I was like, okay, how to switch this back? I don't understand everything yet. So just be sure you have a backup plan. Okay. And then I also reflected on how I learned English and started from there. So yeah, I was like, um, just to put this in context, when I was learning Spanish in formal classes, I got until B1, like nivel 13. And so it might be surprising because I was able to pass tele C1, Cdos, but my formal learning is really just until nivel 13 or 14. That's it. Okay.
Nadine, can I cut you a little bit? So probably
Yes.
some of the learners here, they don't really know like the scale. Obviously, since we're teachers, or most of them have heard of A1, A2. So maybe you can tell them that
Mhm.
something about B1. Like what is B1? Por ejemplo.
Okay. All right. So just to give context for those who might not be familiar with the scale. So we have A1, A2. So those are the beginners. B1, B2. So that's intermediate. Then C1, C2. That's the advanced. I got until B1, which is like lower intermediate, formal classes. And then after that, a lot of my compañeros, they had other plans. And as you know, there's usually a an expected or a required number of students, right, for them to open classes. And in Instituto Cervantes de Manila, that was like 8 hasta 10, so 8 to 10. If you have fewer students in that, then they couldn't open the class or the course. And so that happened to me repeatedly after nivel 13 or 14. I would enroll in the next course, and they would always tell me the day before the course opening that they were canceling the class because there were not enough students. And so I was stuck for quite a long time, like maybe for over a year. And it got very frustrating because I felt like my Spanish was stagnating, right? And it was very hard to find students who were interested in enrolling for such advanced courses. So I said to myself, there has to be another way. Um, this does not have to limit me. And I said, okay, so what other foreign languages do I know? Okay, obviously English. And, I recall thinking, I didn't necessarily have to like master everything in English, right? Even before I finished my education, before I went to high school, I already had a good proficiency in English. Okay, so not to brag, but yeah, I mean, I didn't have any difficulty with it at all. And so I said, okay, so how did I learn? And yeah, that's when I realized, okay, so I did this mostly through observing and acquiring the the language by watching how native speakers spoke and communicated in their native language. So yeah, that's what I did. Said, okay, so maybe what I need is to bring the Spanish classes to me. All right. So if I can't go to the Spanish classes, I'll bring them to me. I'll find the materials, I'll set my schedule, okay, and I'll plan out my strategy. So yes, it's very possible to still learn Spanish even if you can't attend formal classes. Okay, so next one. Okay, so some of you might be asking, do I need extensive immersion? Okay, from experience, extensive or prolonged periods of immersion aren't necessary. Um, for myself, I only got to stay in Spain for a month. So I stayed in Cuenca. It was for an immersion program, and we did get to visit other cities like Valencia, por ejemplo, or Madrid, right? And I didn't come back speaking perfect Spanish. Okay. What worked for me was making the conscious decision to include Spanish in my daily life, even if it was just 15 minutes a day. Okay? So my goal, I realized, was to be able to think in the language, something possible if you expose yourself to it consistently. Okay? Because I think mostly for beginners, there's a tendency to want to translate everything, right? And that's okay. It's very normal because you're still getting out of your comfort zone. You're still trying to familiarize yourself with a new language. But at the end of the day, it's really, I mean, the goal is really to be able to think directly in the language. And you get that from exposure there. So, that being said, people already living in Spanish speaking countries are in a great position to acquire the language. So, you're in a very good position. especially like if you're in Spain, right? You have lots of opportunities. And being in the cultural context where the language is spoken helps a lot. If you can't go on an immersion, however, then it's still possible for you to create the immersion where you are. So if there's a will, there's a way. Okay. So especially with our technology today, there's so much that's accessible to us. Okay, so let's go to the DELA exam. So testing your Spanish proficiency. Okay, I would just like to add that one of the things that made me learn Spanish faster was signing up for the DELA exams. Like the sheer terror. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, but I mean, the nervousness of having to speak before these native speakers who were going to grade me on how well I was able to use the Spanish language was a really great motivation. Okay. So I said stress slows down language learning, but in some cases, it can speed it up as long as it's controlled and it's not prolonged. Okay, so what are the strategies in passing DLC uno and C2? Okay, so number one, these are the things that I can share. Okay, so read a wide variety of materials. Okay, so the DELE will require you to be familiar with some general topics. And when I say general, I mean general. This can be anything from like social icons, which was what I got for my C1 test, right? Or something like what is happiness, okay? Tiempo libre, that was what I got from my Cdos, okay? So things like that, or scientific or technological advances, or even like el medio ambiente, things like that. Okay, practice with other native speakers. So you can use resources like Italki, or if you have native speakers living with you, or native speakers who you're working with, going to classes with, for example, then that's a great opportunity. So for many, the challenge is in speaking. It can really make you nervous because, especially when you take like C1 and C2, you don't have a lot of time to prepare. And usually, even if you prepare something, a big part of the exam will still be impromptu. Like you're going to be interviewed, for example. Okay, so it can help ease your anxiety if you prepare for it by practicing with other native speakers. Get a native teacher. Okay, I cannot stress this enough. Okay, the DELA is a structured assessment, and having someone to guide you can increase your chances of passing. Organization of ideas is important. Okay, so I'm an examiner, but I don't think I'm qualified to walk you through an actual lesson for DELE. So it takes another training to do that. Okay. So, but what you need is someone who can guide you through the skills that you need to acquire before taking the DELE. So it's not as simple as, okay, so you're speaking fluently in the language. Um, you also need to be able to organize your ideas in such a way that they are coherent and they make sense. Okay. So even if you don't use like fancy words, or even if you don't use like complex grammatical structures or use too much subjunctives, you can still pass as long as your ideas are well structured. So that's important. Okay, so do I need to complete a set of courses before taking the DELE? No. Okay, so like I said, I was only able to reach until nivel 13, 14, but I was still able to pass C1 and C2. But it can also help if you can take courses designed specifically to prepare you for the DELE. Okay, that can be very helpful. I think I did that with B1. Okay. So do I need to be familiar with all the grammatical rules or do immersion? Okay, so again, no. But it can help if you have a good grasp of the grammar. So you might be thinking, oh, I haven't mastered all the subjunctives yet. I can't tell pretérito indefinido from imperfecto. Okay, so that's not really super important if you haven't mastered those. But if you have a good grasp of them, then that's actually sufficient. Do I have to research about complex topics beforehand? Partly yes, partly no. Okay, what do I mean by this? I think for DELE, the goal is to gain a broad knowledge instead of something that is too deep. Okay, so as long as you know how to express your thoughts about a given topic, even if it's not too technical or even if it's not at expert level, that's going to be enough. Okay, and again, the topics that I gave, like tiempo libre, el medio ambiente, they don't require you to have like a PhD in those topics, but you do need to know enough to create a discourse around those topics. Okay, so what should I practice? Again, organizing your thoughts. Okay, so the DELA, especially the assessments involving essays and speaking, are all about organizing your ideas. So that's it. And you have to organize them under time pressure. So that's important. Okay, read on topics of general interest and listen to discussions online. This will give you an idea of how to get your points across. You don't need to be technical, but you have to be fairly knowledgeable. Okay, last one, look at exam models available online. So actually, there are some exam models available online, and they will give you an idea of what to expect. And they can also help you familiarize yourselves with the exam structure. So yeah. All right, so another question, why learn another language? Okay, so just as an additional info, other languages I have learned aside from Spanish include Bahasa Indonesia and French. But for French, I haven't gotten past A1. Okay, so maybe I still need to find what really interests me about French. Bahasa Indonesia, I learned this when I was in college as an undergrad, and I had to learn it again for my MA as part of our course. And I think there's something really that draws me towards Bahasa Indonesia. So I think for Bahasa Indonesia, I have maybe a B1 proficiency. I was able to use it a bit when I went to Malaysia because there are similarities, right, with Bahasa Malay and Bahasa Indonesia. So it helped me a bit there. And just last year, I took a 3-month course in it, beginners, just so I could also connect with other people who are interested in the language and just as a refresher. Okay, so what are the benefits? So three C's. The first one is cognitive. So the list of benefits include enhanced memory, okay, so improved concentration, and metalinguistic awareness. Okay, so what's metalinguistic awareness? It's more of you're able to contextualize the language. Like you don't take it literally. For example, an example of this is when you become aware of how the native speakers use the language to communicate things like sarcasm, irony, for example. Okay, so you get better at reading between the lines. And then it's also said to delay cognitive decline. So this refers to things like Alzheimer's, for example. So basically, your brain gets a workout. And if you grew up bilingual, then there's a good chance that you have an advantage in this area. Okay, confidence. So you step out of your comfort zone, you connect with more people, and you discover something new about how you think from another culture's perspective. So, when they say like you have different personalities depending on what language you speak or in what language you're thinking at the moment. So it's kind of like that. Okay. So you get more self awareness, and then you kind of bring that when you communicate with other people. And of course, you also like prove to yourself that, oh, hey, I can do this, right? I'm able to learn this, I'm able to use it, I'm able to adapt. So that will really add to your confidence. Okay, community. So this is not an original like quote of mine, but someone said that you become part of the tribe whose language you learn, and that is true. You don't just connect with other learners, you also connect with the people who speak the language. So for those of you living, like for example, in Spain or other Spanish speaking countries, you may find that this is true. Also, for example, in social media, you may find yourself being able to join the discussion or the threads, right, where other Spanish speakers are participating. So that's for me, you know, that's a good way to have that kind of belonging, you know, and it also expands your view of the world. So you're not as insular. You become more open. Your horizons expand, and it also opens new doors. Okay, so that's it. Summary. This is summary. Reflections on language learning. So at the core, I think this is what I think based on my experience. Language learning is a deeply personal process. So each person chooses his or her own goals, and the changes they go through are highly individualized. So yeah, why you learn a particular language is up to you. Whether aside from Spanish you want to learn like Russian or Germany or Vietnamese, that is basically something that has to do with you. Maybe you're drawn to the culture, right? Maybe you have travel goals. Maybe you want to learn more about um, their literature, for example. Okay. And the changes that you go through with every interaction you have, right? With every risk you take to be able to express yourself in that language, that change is like personalized or tailored to you as well. So it can, for some people, unfortunately, it can be an impediment. Sometimes they become scared, but for some, it can become like, for many, I think, right? It can become more like a challenge to improve and to go much further. Okay, the things we associate with a particular language can be different. The important thing is to find one which sparks interest. Okay, so I forgot who is this. This person's like, if it doesn't spark joy, just throw it out.
Marie Kondo.
Okay. Marie Kondo. Okay, so I mean, sometimes there are things that you have to put up with. There are certain things that you have to endure. For me, it was grammar, really, in order to learn your target language. But for the most part, you also have to find why you're happy learning that language. Because if it's torture, you're probably not gonna stick with it. You're gonna find something else. Okay, so yeah, find that something that sparks interest, that inspires you, you know, to go on, and which makes your language learning process an enjoyable and sustainable one. So yeah, it's being able to sustain, the process. And as with any learning experience, it is important to find mentors who are not only knowledgeable but also patient. So this is important. I think some people believe that they just need to find someone super competent and the rest doesn't matter. But, as with any skill, if the mentor that you choose or the mentors who you choose will also have an effect on how you talk to yourself, perhaps, or how you view yourself. For example, when you have difficulties or when you make mistakes. So if you have mentors who are super critical, who like make fun of you, for example, um, it's not going to be good. So you need to find those who are very patient. Okay. So, and who will, let you know that it's normal to make mistakes, to say weird things, right? Sometimes you say things that can be inappropriate um, when learning a new language because you didn't know. So they'll just be there patiently telling you that, okay, this is the context for this, or this is how it's said. Okay. So yeah, and it's important because when you acquire another language, it takes you out of your comfort zone, and it can be scary at first. I think this is the reason why um, they say that the normal language learning process is you speak first, then you start writing, for example. But I think this is also the fear is the reason why a lot of people put speaking last, because it can be uncomfortable. You can feel very vulnerable, okay, when you're trying to communicate in a language that you're not familiar with. And speaking of which, I'd like to thank again the many people who helped me in learning Spanish. So yeah, that includes people like Carlos Balmaceda, the librarian, or one of my teachers, Marlon Sales. Hi, Marlon. Okay, he's probably not watching. I don't think he's here right now, but I can say that he helped me a lot, to get my confidence in Spanish learning. And of course, the people or our teachers who taught us when we were in Spain doing the immersion, okay? And the natives, who were also patient with us, who tried to communicate with us. And then, as much as you need to have fun, it is also important to have methodical steps in acquiring a target language. So yeah, that's where forming habits comes in. Okay, so maybe you can decide that you listen 15 minutes to a podcast, and then maybe write down your thoughts in a journal, for example, or maybe you can program classes with a teacher, right? Like maybe twice a week, for example. So there, because consistency is also important, and it is just as important to trust the context in which we see that language being used. Okay? So yeah, observe, imitate, but also don't be afraid to ask or clarify certain things. Okay. Last but not least, give yourself time and credit for the effort. Yes, some people may be naturally talented at languages, but it is at the end of the day a skill that can be learned and improved upon. So I think this is one of the things that can be a barrier, because for some people they think that skills like language learning is something innate, like either you have it or you don't, or you're too young or you're too old. Okay. So it's helpful to think about it as a skill, right? So maybe it's much easier if you're a child who hasn't gotten past the so-called critical stage for acquiring a new language, but it is still very possible as an adult to develop new skills, right? Like I said, as long as you're not yet dead, okay, or as long as your brain is still working, as long as you have full use of your faculties, you can actually learn a lot of skills. And language learning is one of them. So it's something that you can improve, something that you can exercise, it's something that you can ask help with. So yeah, always give yourself the credit for stepping out of your comfort zone and risking, risking something, risking to learn something new. There. So muchas gracias. Thank you. Uh, that ends my TED talk. I hope that's
Thank you
helpful.
so much, Nadine. Muchas gracias. I definitely learned a lot of things from that presentation. I already know you, but I think it gives a lot of us here some insights on how to probably not just start learning the language, but also like how to improve it. Because I think most of the time people say like that you really need to be in Spain or in Mexico to learn the language, but you yourself, for example, you just did an immersion which is not even for a year. It was just for a month, and so
Yeah.
that's really impressive. So for people these days to say that we need to be somewhere to learn the language, I think it's just an excuse to start doing something, because you can probably be in Africa or in the US or wherever you are. If you're not really into that, then I don't think you can learn the language. So, and by the way, I have my first question before I read some of the questions here. So, what's next for you? Like, since you have passed these exams, the C2, I know that I think we talked about before you learning French. So I didn't know that you kind of like stopped and moved to Bahasa, which also you're interested in as you're doing masters in Asian studies. So what's next for you? Do you want to learn other languages or just
A-
improve what you already have now?
Actually, to be honest, I just want to improve first on Bahasa Indonesia,
Okay.
because I feel like I want to grow more in that language. And actually, it was the first language that I learned formally. I'm not sure in Spain, but in the Philippines, um, they used to offer free classes for anyone. So that was why we took it when we were undergrad college students, like two of my friends and I. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
French maybe later on. I feel like I'm still struggling a lot with the pronunciation. And what else? For what's next? Okay, so here's the thing. I've always been very interested in translation. I've taken on a few translation tasks. For example, the what do you call this? The silent cinema here in the Philippines. So
Oh
I
yeah.
translated yeah, like they're not really called subtitles, but I guess you can call them that, right? So there are no dialogues, but they do play some text on the screen. So yeah. Unfortunately, here in the Philippines, I don't think there's a lot of translation programs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of doing a PhD program that has to do with Spanish or Filipino Spanish literature. But since I just survived my MA, I'm just resting for now and I'm sticking with teaching.
Yeah.
But long term, those
It's a
are
long term
possible.
plan. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you look forward to do your PhD in Spain or in some other countries? Well, obviously, if
Actually,
it's translation.
mhm. Actually, I inquired with some maybe a couple of programs when in Barcelona.
Mm.
And when it's the program in Barcelona, I don't have the name of it right now, but I remember because this was last year, and I remembered what attracted me to it was that there was a focus on Asian cultures, and that was for me. I think I find it pleasantly
Yeah.
surprising, right? So yeah, and it was translation with a focus on Asian cultures, and since my thesis was on a tetralogy, like four novels, I'm not sure why. Up to this day, I know I loved the story, but to do a thesis on four novels, literary analysis is like, why did you do that? But I'd be like, okay, this might be something that I can do. Yeah.
So
But
guys, for the
unfortunately, maybe with yeah, with the pandemic, yeah, travel is kind of out of the question right now. Yeah.
So,
So
to those of you who probably just came in, Miss Nadine holds a master's degree in Asian Studies from the University of the Philippines. So sometimes like people would ask, like, you did Asian Studies, but like you're learning Spanish. Like, how, like, do you get like questions like that? Like, why eventually? Obviously, you know Bahasa. So why did you like pick Spanish instead of other Asian languages, which could be an option, right? Like Japanese or something.
yeah, okay. So it has a long history, but I'll make it quite short. Okay. So when I was choosing which school I would go to and which course I would choose for my college degree, or yeah, uh we had some difficulties back then, and basically my parents didn't want me to go to Diliman, okay, because it was so far. They were willing for me to go as far as Manila, right? But not Diliman. And so in Manila, I took up social sciences, although I think if I had the opportunity, I would have chosen something like um European languages. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
I'd have studied that. And since I finished social, like area studies, actually, social sciences, major in area studies, I thought it was logical for me to proceed to something related. And to be fair, I really loved learning about people, their cultural language, everything. So I was interested in Asian studies, right? So actually, while I was waiting for news about my admission, I thought to myself, okay, so why not continue with my Spanish studies, right? While I was waiting. But yeah, so I continued because at that time I had gotten as far as nivel dos or level 2, and then I enrolled in nivel tres. But then I found that I couldn't drop Spanish anymore after I started with the MA. I just loved Spanish too much. So I took the two together. And yeah, that's basically the story of how I have my degree in something that concerns Asian cultural languages, politics, but I also have Spanish with the Cdos, and why I became a teacher then. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So it's quite amazing, like how you're telling us all these things. Obviously, your journey as a language learner, Spanish learner, Bahasa, and also at the same time, you're studying something related to people, which is like
Mm-hmm.
social sciences. So, how important it is for you to always connect something to Asia. Obviously, you're studying a European language or European languages, as French as well is one of the language that you study. Like, why is it so important for you to um, always put in like that ingredient whenever you probably when you study and publish something? Like, why is it important in your
I
in
think
your
okay, sorry. I think I see them as interacting. If you think about it, for example, here in the Philippines, the Spaniards were here for like 300 years, for example.
Mhm.
In Indonesia, the Dutch were also there.
Mhm.
Of course, I haven't learned Dutch yet, okay, but I mean, if you think about
Not
it,
yet.
not yet. There's always an interaction, and the thing though that I notice, and I'm not sure if this is entirely accurate, right? But the thing that I notice is that Asia always seems to be somewhat in the periphery. Like if you ask people maybe, okay, what languages would you like to learn or what cultures are you interested in? I think they would cite mostly European cultures, European language, because they think that's the most advantageous, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
one that has more benefits. And to be
Yeah.
fair, right now, it kind of is. But I think it's also important to know our roots, our connection, right? And to to also get to know about our immediate community. And there's a certain pride in that, I think. Like for example, even when I think about our native languages here, I think there are more than 200, and it's
Yes.
amazing
Mm-hmm.
how yeah, it's amazing how we're able to conserve that and still be able to learn other languages. And I've met some actually yeah, I've met some Spanish speakers, not a lot, but they often wonder at how we can mix things, like mix languages. Like they tell me, isn't that kind of making the languages impure, right?
Yeah.
When you do things like code switching,
Mm-hmm.
speaking in Taglish, and well, number one, it's very normal, right, for speakers of multiple languages to do that. And number two, I think it's actually, aside from being normal, I think it's actually good to be able to incorporate other elements from other cultures. So it's not a question of something being pure or impure. It's a question of, for me, it's more of expansion. So that's the perspective that I think is healthier and more helpful. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So thank you so much for that, Nadine. Now I have one question here from Miss Christie, and she asked, "Can I ask about her vocabulary learning process? I'm not sure if she said it already. I would like to know how she tried to learn vocabulary." So yeah,
Okay.
any
At the
tips?
beginning, so at the beginning, what I did was I would read articles and I would like make a list of words that I wasn't familiar with. Right. So I would make a list, then I would try to find out what they meant. But that got pretty boring fast for me. I don't know about your learning style. I think it also depends on your learning style.
Hmm.
But I think I learn more when I learn when I read, but I also think it helps for me to listen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And write things down. So, um after after that period when I was doing vocabulary list, which for me wasn't very helpful anyway because often I would neglect to review it. What I did was I would just start to read more, and instead of taking isolated words, I would observe like phrases, for example,
Yes, in
right?
context.
And yeah, and this is also where materials like notes in Spanish helped because you would actually get to hear real-time conversations between two people,
Mm-hmm.
and they would highlight some of the colloquial phrases used
Mm-hmm.
and some of the important words, right? And they would place them in context for the exercises at the end. So I think that helps me more because, it felt more natural
Mm-hmm.
rather than very rigid and structured. So yeah. It Oh, okay. So I just remembered because I'm sure you're familiar with this, but there's an online dictionary called Word Reference,
Oh, I use
right?
that a lot. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So, just in case for those who don't know, it's word reference, and the helpful thing about word reference is yes, it's it's a bilingual dictionary depending on what language you're learning, but there are also forums
Mm-hmm.
uh, when you want to ask, okay, so I know this word means something
Sorry.
like this, but I've seen it being used in other contexts, or I don't understand why they're saying this. Right?
Yeah.
So you can ask that, and native speakers will actually help you. So that's a good way. Oh, Lingui. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually use Lingui because, as you were saying, we need to see the words inside the context on how they are being used, or if the frequency of that word is a lot. So I try to like whenever I look for words, I try to type in the word there and see the occurrences of these words. So yeah, I use
Mm-hmm.
both of them. Okay, so we have another question from Dana. Realistically speaking, and with daily practice, how long do you think it'll take for someone to be fluent in Spanish? 3 years or more?
Okay. Oh, wait. Before I address Dana or Dana's question, wait, I think we had another question
Oh
from
yeah, sure.
John.
Yeah,
I'll
sure,
just
sure.
go to that
Yeah,
first,
yeah, go.
and then I will, yeah, I'll answer the that question from Dana. Okay, so John says how to take Dele. I'm currently working as a Spanish bilingual. I want to know my level. Okay, so when you take Dele, I'm not sure, but here in the Philippines, like you just go to, for example, Instituto Cervantes de Manila.
Mm,
Then you tell them that you're gonna take the DELE exam, what level. Then they
mm,
have you fill out a form,
mm.
right? They ask you for, I think it's a government issued ID. I remember I always give them my
Passport.
passport.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then yeah, you just the preparation is basically up to you. But again, my advice is to get a native teacher. Just in case you might think, oh, okay, a native teacher, how long is that gonna take? In my case, I think the most we had was about 5 to 6 sessions, an hour each. So yeah, um, and then yeah, because they'll just help you with organizing your ideas, um, focusing on vocabulary that you need to know or you might need to know for the exam. So that's it. But as long as you have your inscription for the DELE, then you can just go to the testing exam testing or exam center on the day of your assessment, and then that's it. Usually it's also, I think it's also divided into like two parts. Like for the in the morning, you usually have your written assessments,
Oh, I
and
remember
then in
that.
the
Yeah.
afternoon, yeah, that's when you have your
Speaking.
yeah, your expression, what do you
Expresión
call
oral.
this? Yeah, expression oral.
Yeah.
Hmm. And then okay, so Dana's question was, oh, by the way,
How long does it
um
take, girl?
sorry, by the way, you might be wondering, do I need to take it from A1 to A2?
Oh
No. The
yeah,
first
yeah.
that I took was B1. That was the first DELE that I took. So you don't need to start from scratch. But okay, fair warning though, of course, there's a chance that you might not pass the DELE. So I know of people like that. And then they passed eventually on their second take. So if you don't pass the DELE, um, just take it as uh, like it's like it will help you to learn where you need to improve on. So it's not necessarily like, oh, it's a failure. No, it means okay, so what else do I need to improve on? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think you get your grades later on, you get a copy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see, oh, okay, where did I get the lowest score, for example, or where did I not pass?
Yeah, and also I think it's like people can take Dele like for like how many times they want to.
Yeah.
Obviously, so I don't think like you should be like frustrated because language learning is a journey. And as Nadine was saying, you can just skip all the levels and just take C1 if you think you are already prepared to take that exam, right? Like you don't have to pass all the levels before taking a specific exam.
Yeah.
So,
Although the advantage in like I can also recommend is if you just want to know your level, you can take
mm,
like a diagnostic exam.
mm,
And the good thing about that is that number one, it would cost less. Okay. And then number two, you also get like to assess your level before you actually go ahead with the DELA exam. I think they have a new exam right now, which is the CL, but that's for specific like purposes. Like for example, if you're gonna work for another company where they where they require Spanish, but they don't necessarily have to prove that you're good in all of the destrezas or all of the like skills.
competencies, yeah.
Yeah, then the CL could be the exam for you.
I feel like
And then the other
Ciele,
thing,
correct me if I'm
yeah,
wrong, like I think Ciele is kind of like in English like an IELTS because it's not valid for life unlike the DELA certificate, right? So it's just for like a particular company or needs.
yeah, yeah, that's it. You can also find out more about this. Like if you search CLA online, you can get information about this assessment.
Mm.
And then, okay, so yeah, let's go to Dana's question. Sorry. So realistically speaking, in the daily practice, how long do you think it will take for someone to be fluent in Spanish? 3 years or more? Okay, so I think 3 years is a safe amount of time for you to get fluent, right? But again, you have to be consistent. For some people, it can be less, you know. because you might some people say, okay, it's impossible to be fluent in that amount of time. You probably need decades of experience, but that's not necessarily the case. Okay? So actually, in some intensive courses, like especially if you do one-on-one, it might be less than a year. So yeah. But if you're just learning by yourself, it might take about 2 to 3 years before you can be fluent. But even before you reach the fluency stage, you should be able to communicate comfortably in the language. So you may still be grasping for words, you still may be missing vocabulary, you may still not be familiar with all of the expressions, but intermediate is a good place to be in. And then, okay, what can you advise for those having vergüenza speaking in Spanish? For me, I practice a lot. But I would say, well, when I try to speak, I tend to forget that I would say things. Yeah, this tended to happen to me a lot in B1, A2, B1. Okay, so what helped me was, for example, I had a resource like Notes in Spanish, right? I had um, colloquial phrases that I would practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like trying out these, like maybe they could be connectors, like aunque, pese a que, for example. Um, or it could be words like, okay, digamos, like let's say, for example. So
Mm.
I would practice those to make the conversation sound more natural. And then, of course, it's not going to be enough. For the vergüenza, like if you're in a group, just remember, no one there is an expert, okay? And you don't have to be embarrassed about making mistakes because you're all learning. However, it could be a different scenario when you're speaking with a native and you're very unsure. You might feel judged by the speaker. But I think that you have to keep in mind, for example, when I was in Spain, right? In my during the immersion, during the month-long immersion. So for me, what I kept in mind was, okay, these are also people, because I think they were learning English too, right? So I think it's either English or another language like French, right? So yeah, they also have that context in which they're also vulnerable learning another language. So it's not just you. It's an experience that's actually shared by a lot of people. So that can help to ease your anxiety. Like, okay, I'm not the only one going through this. Okay. And yeah, so my advice would be just to keep that in mind and to find people who will actually help you with speaking. Right. So
Mm.
like maybe intercambio, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you expand your circle little by little.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, and then that can help you to be more confident in speaking. Okay, so when in
Actually,
class, like, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, actually, in my case, I think like here in Spain, I notice usually like people don't really care. Like, even if you are using a different word, as long as they understand you,
Yeah.
they don't mind. To be honest, I think it's just more of like Filipinos. Like, oh my God, I don't want to say this. They might judge me. You know, like
Yeah.
they don't have that kind of mentality. So like,
I think yeah, you'll find that a lot of native speakers are more how should I say this? They're more understanding. In
mm,
fact, even right now, sometimes I forget the word or I'm not exposed enough to the subject, so I don't really know the terms that they use. So I would like say como se dice, for example, and then they provide it, and that actually helps me to improve.
mm,
So it's okay. They're not gonna say, "Oh my God, you're an imposter" or something like that.
yeah, that's true.
Especially if they know that you're still learning. Yeah, they're much kinder. I think it's also just the culture that we have, especially with English. Like if you don't know English, you're judged for it, or if you have wrong grammar or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But it,
there.
it happens. Like people sometimes think that if you've reached C1 or C2, people think that you cannot make mistake or but it happens to everyone. You know, like sometimes since you are in a country and then you use this language a lot, sometimes even your own language or your second language, sometimes you forget. Like sometimes whenever I think or I speak in class, Like Spanish words just came in like automatically, and I forgot the word. I was like, oh my god, bilingual, like bye. It's really like bye.
Oh,
So
by the way, I don't know, Nicole, if you write, but for me that helped. Like for example, I would just write, for example, what I think about a certain topic or what happened during the
mhm.
day. Yeah, my opinions, for example, or observations. And then sometimes it just translates to speaking
Mm.
because they say that you also retain a lot more information when you write. So for me, that
That is
helps.
true.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And also, just to share with you, when I was doing my Se Uno, Dele, so I was super nervous. I felt like I was about to die. Actually, okay, speaking of vergüenza and maybe being nervous and afraid, uh, during the preparation period for the speaking competency, I was given 20 minutes to read an article and then create a monologue based on the information in the article. Honestly, I just wanted to run and escape. But okay, I knew I couldn't do that because number one, if I did that, I would be forever known as that person who ran, who escaped the Delesea Uno. And number two, I felt like okay, I had already gone through a lot to get to that point. So, just to get ahead with it. Um the thing that helped me to get over that fear, you know, was to basically um I was writing, right? And my topic was on social icons. So it helped a lot to think about what what are the personal experiences or opinions that I could give in this instead of coming up with something highly structured and technical or thinking about what do they expect me to say, right? So sometimes you will find that when you draw from maybe your personal opinions, experiences, you actually have a lot more to say in your target language than you think. So yeah, and it helped to ease the anxiety. And later on, I passed the Delhi, even though I was super nervous at first. So that can also help you. So just like, express, express what you think, write down, get your thoughts on paper,
Uh huh.
observe how others do it. So that can also make it more automatic in your mind. And always remember, it's not an experience that is unique to you. Other people get nervous too when learning foreign language or when trying to express themselves in another language. And even the people like the Spaniards who you speak with or the Spanish speaking people, they also have their own challenges, like when they learn English, for example. So they probably understand where you're
Hmm.
coming from.
We have another question from Ivy. You said
Hmm.
that earlier to get a native Spanish teacher. So, what's your stand about native bilingual Spanish teachers, native level? What if I want to get a bilingual one, who I think is really good and teaching, who is certified? Is it me or is it Nadine you're referring to? No, just kidding.
Actually,
So, what is your
no,
stand on
actually,
that? I think it depends on the level, right? So, if
yeah, actually, okay, sorry. Yeah, native or native level teacher is actually also good. Hmm. So, for example, we have a lot of good teachers here in the Philippines. Like one of them, he's even done his PhD in Australia and is now teaching in, I think it's in Massachusetts in the US, or I think it's in Michigan, sorry, in the US. So yeah, as long as you can find someone who is competent, of course, you also need to find like maybe reviews, for example, like how do they conduct their classes. Yeah, so that's also important. So yeah, you can get a native teacher, but if you can also find someone who is very proficient in the language, native level, and who actually has like training on how to prepare someone for the DELA exam, that can
yeah.
also be good. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the important thing. They actually know how to prepare you, what you need to study, what you need to review, so they can focus your yeah, they can focus your review.
Also, it's yeah, because also there are tons of people teaching Spanish these days, but a lot of them sometimes, since that's their language and they are not trained to teach the language because those are both
Yes.
different scenarios, they cannot
Mm-hmm.
transmit like the message or make you understand because making learning a language and speaking it are different from making
Listening.
people understand. And so sometimes it's better if you get a bilingual teacher, or the teacher who also speaks your language, because he would give you tips on how he did it in his way that is easier for you as well, since you share the same language. So
Yeah,
that.
actually, just to add, the native teachers that I picked, they actually stated that they had competency in preparing students for the DELA exam. So that
Mm,
was why I chose them. Not actually, yeah, now that I think about it, it's not just specifically because they
they're
are native
native, yeah.
speakers. Yeah. Because the thing about native speakers, I mean, not to put down native speakers or anything, but the thing about them is that, like when you learn a language, for example, Tagalog, like when you acquire it, right? There could be so many rules. Like when someone asks you, okay, so why do you say things like this, or when do you say this, right? They might not be able to explain the explicit rules because it's like, oh, okay, it's just natural, it's just intuitive. But with a bilingual teacher,
SSC,
uh,
SKSSC.
yeah,
Like you can just, you can just say that every
yeah.
time.
So I mean that it has its advantage. Like, oh, okay, so this is how they use it, and I can just imitate, and I can just stress the context. But then, if you really need help with explicit grammar rules, like when to use the imperfecto versus the indefinido, okay, and yeah, I can tell you that yes, there are rules in place, right, that will help you to distinguish better which kind of past tense you need to use, for example. So a bilingual might be able to, or a bilingual who also speaks your language
Hmm.
might be able to give you better comparisons, might be able to make
Yes.
you understand better.
True.
Not saying
Yes.
that a native can't do that, but uh, I guess the bottom line is a bilingual native teacher can also help you as much as a native one.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So there. Are there any other questions that um we haven't read?
I think that's all the questions we have in chat.
Yeah, I
And
think that's
oh,
everything. Is it?
okay.
What happens?
Oh,
What, what
after
happens?
C2, you gain superpowers. No, I'm just kidding. Um, after said those, okay, so number one, you feel satisfied, like, okay, I have achieved this, right?
Yeah.
And you're actually free to explore other areas. Like in my case, it's translation. That's really what I want to do. Like, specifically literary translation.
Mm.
Okay. So because there are other types of translation, like you want to translate for academic papers, for
Yeah.
example, if you want it to be more corporate. Um, I think it was a few years ago, someone asked if I could do a translation work, which was more of interpretation, I think. Yeah, not really translation, but yes, it's more of interpretation for a bottling company. Because there were some Mexicans who were coming in, and I was like, I would love to, but there's a lot of technical stuff like engineering that I'm not familiar with. But literary translation, yes. And yeah, so it really depends on you. Or maybe do you want to go into teaching, right? There's a formación, for professors.
Mm,
You can
for the
also look into
professores.
that.
Mm.
Yeah. Actually, if you're a professor of Instituto Cervantes de Manila, you might find other opportunities open for you, like there are free courses or free trainings, or there could be discounted courses for if you wish to take masters in L, which is teaching Spanish as a foreign language.
Mm.
So yeah, but it depends on you. Maybe you can just continue with your learning, continue connecting with other natives or other Spanish speakers or other Spanish teachers, just to hone your language skills. So it's really up to you.
Mm.
But definitely, if you get a Cdos, there's a lot of, including educational ones. Like maybe if you apply for further studies
Yeah.
in Spain, maybe or elsewhere, or in Spanish-speaking countries, if you're Cdos, then that's always a good thing to have on your resume. And then, how do you continue learning after you've taken the Cdos? Okay, so for me, I always think of myself as an aprendiz. Like I don't think it's ever ended,
Mm.
you know. When I speak with people, I always tell them, I'm still learning Spanish up until now. Because the thing is, it's true, especially since I don't live in Spain or any other Spanish speaking countries. So it's easy to get complacent, right?
True.
Like to think, oh, okay, I've passed the deadline, that's it, I'm an expert. But that's not actually true. You will always have to learn the language, you'll always have to include it in your activities, you'll always have to do the same activities as
Basically,
before.
breathe it.
Because yeah, because there's a thing is when they say use it or lose it. Like that's true even with like muscles, like atrophy. If you don't use them, right, they shrink. So that's the same with language. If you don't keep on interacting, if you don't keep on using it, if you don't keep on learning new things about it, it's gonna disappear. So you always have to be in that learning mode. Like you're never an expert, you're always a student. So for me,
Okay.
that's my principle. Yeah.
Oh my god, there's a lot of like learnings for today. So I hope that you, Nadine, so you're planning to study soon or you're on a break? Or you're just
I'm on
looking,
a break for
yeah.
my mental health because I just
Yeah,
survived my MA.
that is true.
Maybe, yeah, maybe next year. I'm looking into taking a PhD program, but maybe I could also look into specialized translation courses, or maybe I could continue teaching. So it's really very open-ended as of now, especially since with the pandemic,
Yeah.
a lot of our plans were put on hold. Actually, if I have the chance, I'd like to go back to Spain and, maybe see first what opportunities there could be.
Mm.
But as of now, it's, yeah, there's nothing really fixed.
Mm-hmm. I think like these days with the pandemic, a lot of universities offered courses online. So, but obviously, if you wanna be in the country, then that could also be an option for you. So there.
Yeah.
I think we have
Oh, by
answered.
the way,
Yeah, sure, sure.
sorry. I was gonna say that Instituto Cervantes, the Manila, I think the same with other Instituto Cervantes branches worldwide. They have activities
Mm-hmm.
and we still offer online courses. So yeah, if you're interested, you can, that's something that you can do. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's still open.
Are they
Currently, we're
are they
using
all online these days in Instituto Cervantes
yeah,
Manila?
all
Okay.
of the courses are online.
Via
So maybe
Zoom
we
or in
will
which platform?
Zoom. Maybe by next year, hopefully, we will get back to the classes presenciales, which for me, I think is much better because you interact.
Yeah, sure.
Because online learning is quite limited, although it has its own advantages. Like you can do, I think, a lot more activities, or when it comes to material sharing.
Mm.
But then again, I think it's much more fun to be in the same room as other learners and to interact with them, like
Yeah,
personally. So yeah.
that is true. So we have already, I think, answered all of the questions. Do you guys have any other questions? So I think, I think that's it, Nadine. I'm so glad and grateful that you that you attended this event. Actually, we had some technical problems, but since
Yeah,
we resolved it.
we lost internet, so I'm sure I think we have a lot of Filipinos here, you can relate, like internet connections in the Philippines. We were without internet for 3 weeks. So just got it back like 2 days ago.
Yeah, we're so grateful. So me personally, like it inspired me a lot because you said like you've just you learning Bahasa now. So I think for everyone as well, like they're gonna start learning Spanish even if they're not in Spain. So yeah, that's amazing.
Hopefully.
S-
So there.
s-
Yeah, I would just also like to thank everyone who attended. Hopefully you were able to get some recommendations like materials. I think I can send a copy of the presentation to Daryl
yeah,
and
and then I can send it to them.
so again, I'm not an endorser of any of the materials, but they are the ones which have helped me, and hopefully you can use them. Especially, oh yes, the last question, like yeah, it's related to like how do you continue learning after you've taken the Cdos? Yeah, that's it. You just keep on learning, exposing yourself to the materials, and that will expand because sometimes you think what you've learned is enough, but then you'll be surprised. to learn more about the language culturally. That's where a lot of the learning is as well.
That is true. Like, I really want to thank you because I think this really helps a lot of people, especially that people who think that only certain nationality could do it. But like we can really study foreign languages as well and reach the proficiency level as we're saying. So, yeah, thank you so much, Nadine, and everyone who has joined today, has joined us today, and we're gonna see you soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much. Adios. Hasta luego.
Adios.